Hello, I'm Kai Rozga, and welcome to Version Up, one lawyer's journey to digitally transform his legal practice. Hi, thank you for joining and listening to this episode, but please don't take anything I say too seriously. This is not my day job, and all views expressed here are my own. The topic today is Agentic AI. I will try to answer four main questions. The first being, what is Agentic AI? The second being, how can it benefit your legal practice? The third, why would you want to learn how to build and deploy Agentic AI yourself, as opposed to using third-party tools? And the last is some tips on how to make your first AI agent. So let's dive in. Starting with, what is Agentic AI? I'm not a technical person, so I will give you my layman's definition. I view it as essentially mini programs or applications that perform a series of tasks for you. You don't have to program them per se, because you can actually use off-the-shelf tools with a user interface that relies on plain language prompts to develop the agent. The key to Agentic AI is automation. You create an agent that does something for you that you would have done manually before. So to get a little technical, this is distinct from process automation or workflow tools. For those that are operating on the Microsoft suite, that would be the Power Automation functionality. And it differs from that because it adds the power of reasoning to the process. And the result is that you're able to create an automatic process for yourself that does more than just click buttons on your behalf or do simple tasks. It actually adds analysis and creates content. Developing an AI agent basically means giving it instructions to tell it, what are you trying to do? What steps you want it to take to achieve that outcome? And then have it generate some sort of outputs or alerts or take some sort of automatic steps on your behalf. So let me start by giving a non-legal example of how this might look like, because I think it's easier to start there before we get into some of the legal use cases. So take, for example, your standard internet search. Let's say you want to get some sushi. What would you have done in the Web 1.0 version of the world? You would have gone to Google and you would have typed in sushi. Maybe you would put sushi near me, and then you would browse and select some restaurants and try to learn about them. Now, what did ChatGPT change about how we look for a sushi restaurant? Now you can pull up ChatGPT or your favorite Gen AI chatbot. You tell it something like this: I'm a sushi aficionado who likes to eat fish sourced from the Tsuchiki market in Japan. Recommend a restaurant for me to get sushi on Friday night at 7 p.m. And for those of you who have been playing around with these sorts of tools, you know you'll get back a pretty helpful overview of your options. What is different if you have an AI agent perform this task? Now, you give it the same prompt that I just explained you would use in your ChatGPT search, and you give it some additional instructions. You tell it, book the reservation, add it to my calendar, and send me a reminder about when to leave the house with instructions for which subway to take to get there. So you can see how, as we progress through these different iterations of searching for information online, we're now reaching a point where not only are we getting the information, not only is it being tailored to the specific need that we have, now we deploy these agents to do something out in the real world on our behalf. That is the magic of Agentic AI, and that is going to be the focus of today's discussion. how can an AI agent benefit you in your legal practice? Let's start with what things look like at the moment when you just use your standard Gen AI chatbot. So I have access to Copilot, and so that's been the focus of my experience. And I know that maybe it's not the best option out there for some people and some uses, but I think it's a pretty good representation of how this process normally works. So when I use Copilot to try to support my legal practice, I find that using the standard chatbot interface can be underwhelming because my frictions and the issues that I run into in being efficient, they're not in knowing how to find an answer to a question. I've spent 15 years refining that ability. That is the core job that a lawyer plays. You get a question, you have to find an answer. And over the years, you develop pretty good tools and skills for how to do that. And so I don't really need a chatbot to cut those corners. I feel like I've gotten pretty efficient at getting to the answers that I need pretty quickly. Now, at the same time, I've spent 15 years developing a kind of judgment, intuition, expertise that off-the-shelf generative AI tools just cannot replicate. They cannot think and approach problem solving like someone who's been thinking about my area of expertise for 15 years. That's why merely using Copilot to look things up on the internet, for example, doesn't result in the aha kind of moment that I think some people experience when they engage with these tools for something in their day-to-day life, like, for example, booking a restaurant or a vacation. So that's not the friction that I need solved by AI in my legal practice. My frictions are more in the day-to-day workflows that I go through to do my work. It's how I gather the inputs and the information that I use to generate an answer to a question. It's how do I take that answer and turn it into an output or an action to help advise the business or my client on that question or that issue. So for me, if I was to think carefully about what kind of frictions I have and what kind of needs I have that would make my practice more efficient, it's not so much in the area of discovery or research. It's really in the area of just getting through the process of converting a question to an answer in a non-substantive almost kind of way. In my view, AI agents are really promising and could tackle that friction to unlock some of the real magic of generative AI. So what are the potential use cases for deploying AI agents in legal practice? The list is potentially endless, and every lawyer, every practitioner will have their own ideas and have their own challenges. And that's part of the beauty and I think a reason for thinking about how to learn to do these AI agents yourself. Let me give you one example just to maybe get the creative juices flowing. Let's say you are a practitioner who has to fill out a certain kind of regulatory form on a regular basis. And let's say that you receive information from a client. It's the same questions that you send to them. They give you the same format in terms of answers. And then you have to take those answers and put them into some sort of regulatory form or application that gets submitted to a governmental agency. You could imagine an AI agent that automates a lot of that process, meaning you take your standard questions that you've already been using and those get sent to the client. You automate taking that response and putting it into the form. There would be some reasoning and analysis the agent would have to do and making sure that the answers go into the right place and are relevant. And then on the back end, you would have a first draft of that form that you could then review and finalize. And hopefully it's cut out some of the work on the front end. So that's one example. Another might be that you want to automate the process by which business people come to you with certain questions and you point them to answers that are on an intranet site. This could be policies or rules or guidance materials that you have available to your employees. And whereas currently there might be a sort of manual process for someone reaching out to you, you identifying the helpful information, you sending it back to them. You can imagine a situation where an agent automates that and takes the request and by itself figures out what is the subject matter of the request and then proposes what kind of materials exist on the intranet that can answer those questions or address those topics, and then quickly sends them to the business person without any delay, without having to wait to have any phone calls, without having to wait for someone to come back from being out of the office for a day. That's the kind of thing that you could also imagine an AI agent being developed with not too much complexity, I think, and address something that creates some friction in your practice. And of course, from the perspective of the business person, creates some friction in their practice as well. So that's a couple of examples. But again, this is going to be so specific to the work that you do that I don't think it helps to go into every example. I think you think about what are the right features of a problem that can be addressed using AI agents and just use that as a guiding framework as you think about your practice day to day and start trying to flag for yourself, where are the situations I could become more efficient by using an AI agent to automate some of the work that I do. Now, why would you want to start deploying an AI agent or building an AI agent on your own? I think there's actually a handful of reasons why that might be the case, why you may not want to go straight to a third-party vendor for this, and why you might actually want to start playing around with this using some off-the-shelf functionality from your enterprise solution. The first one is, why wait for a vendor to create your solution? You can do it yourself. And having surveyed the market, there are a lot of great tools out there that are very specific to different kinds of legal practice. They're not going to capture everything that you need in your practice. And so being able to target the development of an AI agent for your specific needs based on your individual workflows, your processes, your data, that is pretty powerful, especially at a stage that we're at in legal tech where there's a lot of untapped ideas out there and the solutions that are out there are not necessarily a good fit for your practice. The other reason I think it's a good thing to think about learning how to develop AI agents is when you know how something's been made, and in particular, this is an issue with AI where people have a lot of trust issues surrounding the responses that they get when they engage with chatbots. If you know how that AI agent was made, I think it gives you more confidence in the answers and the solutions that it provides. Meaning if you get to see a little bit under the hood, you don't need to know how the engine's made, but knowing a little bit about how the car operates gives you some more confidence that it's not going to drive you off the road. And I think it's the same thing with technology, especially for lawyers who are innately, intrinsically risk averse and who face disproportionate costs for being wrong. And so for them, from their perspective, accuracy and confidence in these tools is critical. So I think when you start tinkering with them yourselves, you get to a point where you're using these agents, you feel better about the fact that you know how the sausage was made. And so you feel a little more confident that it's not going to give you a stomach ache. Another reason to do this yourself is you can skip the costly and drawn out process of budgeting, selecting, and onboarding a new legal tech solution. Essentially, it gives you the ability to do it now using your existing tools instead of having to go through whatever process you have at your organization for deploying a new third-party tool. And if you're already on 365 with Microsoft or on the Google Suite, if you're already at a workplace environment where those enterprise tools are being deployed, the barrier to using them for developing AI agents is going to be quite low. And on top of that, your ability to leverage your existing data that you have already within that productivity suite in a secure environment is going to be untapped, is going to be really something that you can unlock very quickly. The other reason I think it's smart to start thinking about how to develop these AI agents by yourself is it's a good way to get over some of the initial stumbling blocks that we run into when trying to deploy technology in large organizations. It allows you to essentially jump in and start to iterate. And by iterate, I'm really thinking of it in the tech startup-y kind of way, that instead of trying to plan out and strategize and know exactly how things are going to play out, you just start playing with it. You just start trying solutions, and you might fail, you will fail, and you learn from that failure, and then you improve. And then eventually you come out on the other end with an effective solution. By jumping in and going through this iterative process, you're going to get there quicker to the end, and you're going to end with a more accurate, effective solution than if you were to try to take a more methodical, drawn out approach. And I think this can be a little difficult for lawyers who, again, in their practice and in the demands of their industry and their field, iteration is not really the way that you get to a legal answer. You don't want to go to your client with 3 wrong answers until you get to the right one. That's not how we as lawyers do our practice. And so thinking about using technology in that way may not really feel intuitive, but I think it is the right way to think about using technology if you are looking for addressing specific issues and narrow problem sets in your practice. And so to me, it's all about striking a balance between having a thoughtful plan and a thoughtful strategy for how to digitally transform your organization, but balancing that with the need to just start deploying and learning from the iterative process. Finally, and I think this might be the strongest reason for doing this yourself, it's you are training a new muscle. This is about learning a new skill. It's about learning a new way of doing your, so it's not like learning to program. It's not anything more than becoming better at making PowerPoint presentations, for example. If you are making very simple text-heavy PowerPoint presentations, all the power to you. But some of us have tried to add some snazz to our PowerPoints. Maybe it's images, maybe it's moving things, maybe it's something more interactive. As PowerPoints get more dynamic, we just pick up these skills almost without noticing, right? But in the end, if you looked at your PowerPoint that you make now and the one that you made 10 years ago, I guarantee you it looks a lot better now, and it's a lot more engaging now than it was 10 years ago. And that comes from learning how to use PowerPoint more effectively. And AI is no different. The tools that we are seeing now and the way that AI is being used to improve legal practice, it really requires a new skill set for all of us professionals, including lawyers. And so you need to learn how to think of AI as a solution to a problem. You need to know how to identify what AI is good at and what it's not. What kind of solution can it solve? What kind of solution is it not good at solving? You need to be able to identify what is the foundational data or knowledge that AI tools need. And so the best way to do that is not to sit down and have someone explain it to you. I think it's to do it yourself and to develop that skill set and build that muscle. And so over time, you're going to be more proficient at using AI tools, whether they are things that you develop in-house, something simple like an agent, like we're going to talk about today, or whether it's something more complicated, a third-party tool that has more complexity, more advanced capabilities. I think you're going to be better at identifying good products and deploying them if you have built this muscle up. So to bring it to a simple example, this is really like, to me, generative AI and agents powered by AI is learning the Googling of tomorrow. Anyone who's old enough to have been around during the transition of the internet from the pre-internet search days, the pre-Google days to the post-internet search, post-Google days, they know that if you know how to use Google effectively before your coworkers, you had a competitive advantage in a sense because you almost were like a wizard. AI-powered legal tools, these are things that are like learning the Google of tomorrow. And we're all going to learn it at a different pace, but the ones who do it sooner and more effectively are going to have an easier time getting their work done. They're going to have more time to focus on other things, whether it's work or otherwise. And I think that the long run steady state of the industry, of legal practice, whether you're in-house or at a law firm, will see a combination of third-party tools and your own developed agents, or more simply process automation workflows, or even just saving your own prompts in ChatGPT or whatever chatbot you use. These are all on a spectrum of AI powered legal solutions. I think we're going to see a combination of things that people do themselves, things that maybe are developed in-house by a legal operations professional, and things that are deployed using third-party software. Learning how to think about using some of these agents yourself and developing them yourself, it's really no different than relying on internet search for some solutions and a advanced legal services database for others. So take your Google and take your LexisNexis. You use both, right? I don't think there's any lawyer out there who would say they never use Google for their legal work in some capacity. And at the same time, I don't think there's many lawyers out there who don't rely on some third-party service that has powerful data as well. And so you do both. And I think that's going to be the same thing with AI. You're going to have your own prompts that you've saved, your own AI agents, and more powerful, more complex third-party tools powered by AI as well. Finally, let's talk about how you go about making your first AI agent. And I'm going to try to provide you some tips. The first tip has to do with how do you select the right tool to use? I would say your path of least resistance is to start with an AI agent tool that is part of your existing productivity suite. I'll take the example I'm most familiar with. That would be the Microsoft 365 suite. For me, that would be Copilot Studio. That is their product that offers building AI agents. Why do I recommend it? First of all, it's going to be much easier to get approvals if you need them. It's going to be much easier to deploy an additional feature of an existing product that you already are using at an enterprise level than it will be to bring in a third-party product. I think it's also easier to deal with cybersecurity concerns, which are a huge driver of onboarding new legal tech software at a large corporate or any large organization. You already have gotten over that hurdle by deploying a enterprise-wide productivity suite, adding the AI agent functionality. It should not materially change that. The key reason, though, for using your existing productivity suite is that the power of these agents lies in leveraging your own internal data and being able to connect to your existing workflows. So what I mean by that is, if you are on the 365 suite, if you are like me using OneNote, you're using SharePoint, you're using Outlook, you're using Teams, you're using all the different aspects of that productivity suite to communicate with your coworkers and to keep notes, to keep the data that you use and store. That data is already there on that productivity suite. Tapping into it is going to be a lot easier if you just use the AI agent functionality that's already built into that productivity suite. And for the same reason, you can be able to tap into your existing workflows. How do you communicate with your coworkers? Which tools do you use to track your activities and events? Where do you keep your task list? You're going to be tapping into all of those when you start developing these AI agents and giving them specific tasks to perform. I'll also add that if you take the main incumbent productivity suites, they are getting quicker at adopting key functionality. So might there be some delay in using that as opposed to a third-party program? Probably. But I don't think this is like it was in the olden days where your major incumbent productivity suite felt like it was years behind in terms of cutting edge functionality. I think that the speed at which new functionality being added is so quick that there's not a huge lead time for the quote unquote startups or other third party providers. They might have an advantage for some time, but it's not a long enough time that would justify someone at a large corporate or a large law firm going through the process of trying to onboard that third-party tool. I think there has to be another reason for it other than, oh, this other tool has a few extra functions. I don't think that should be the reason for going with the third-party tool, because I just don't think that the delay is that long anymore. So the main takeaway for me in deciding when it's appropriate to rely on your existing productivity suite to build AI agents, it's about being practical in understanding that using the best tool is not always the right way to go about things. From a practical standpoint, whether you're at a large law firm, a large legal corporate, any large organization, we all know there are practical considerations that mean the best tool is not necessarily the right way to approach it. If what you're trying to do is get to a point sooner where you can use these tools to make yourself more efficient. Now, having said that, there are, of course, going to be circumstances where branching out and using a third-party vendor product will make sense. And so what are the kinds of tasks requiring a third-party vendor product to develop AI agents? One is going to be tasks that are just too difficult or complex to build yourself. Things that you can't break it down into component parts when building an AI agent. It's going to be tasks that require any kind of advanced engineering that makes the answer more accurate, that makes the answer come quicker. There are a lot of engineering tricks and expertise that is used by third-party vendors to help take what would be maybe slower or less accurate when it's out of the box using one of these large language models and turn it into something that is giving you quicker, more accurate answers that you need in your practice. So that could be things like prompt engineering. This is where when developing some of these AI agentic tools, third-party vendors know how to craft the prompts to get the right answer. It could be selecting the right large language model that is most fit for purpose for the task. So if you are using Copilot, that means you are using a tool that's built on the OpenAI large language model, and it's not using the Google Gemini large language model. And there are differences in how those large language models work and the answers they give you. And so third-party vendors are good at identifying which large language model to use for what kind of problem set, and that can lead to a better outcome for the user. And there are a lot of other technical differences or technical value add that third-party vendors take advantage of to make their products better than anything you could do in-house. I'm sure the list is endless, but it goes without saying that there are going to be certain things that are beyond your capability or even your legal operations or even your IS department's capability that you may consider a third-party vendor necessary to handle. Additionally, tasks that rely on data you don't have access to, that's going to be another kind of problem set that a third-party vendor will be able to address that you will not be able to address internally by building your own AI agent. For example, if you have a problem that can only be solved by accessing non-public data, then if you don't have access to the data, you can't build a tool that leverages that data. So you might go to a tool that has access to some of the big legacy legal service providers like LexisNexis, et cetera, to be able to leverage that data. The last reason why you might want to use a third-party vendor's AI agent capabilities is that it might be important to you what the UI or UX looks like or feels to the user. So the user interface or user experience might be important because it's not something that just you will be using. Maybe it's something you plan to share with the rest of your group or your department. Maybe you're going to deploy it company-wide. And so you may be anticipating that some users of that agent might be less sophisticated or maybe less motivated to use it. And so you want to make sure that the user experience is as friendly as possible. And for that, I think using the off-the-shelf productivity suites AI agent capabilities is probably going to result in a user experience that is just not as smooth or easy as some of the third-party vendors. So let's say you've gotten past the first question, which is, are you doing it yourself? Are you doing it with an outside vendor? And let's say you've decided you're going to do it yourself. You want to dive in and develop your own AI agent. You want to address some specific needs you have. You want to do it now. And in the process, you want to learn a few things about how these AI tools work. And hopefully you'll level up, give yourself some more skills and be a more tech savvy practitioner. What kind of tasks do you tackle when you're developing an AI agent? I think there's a few really important things to keep in mind when you're deciding what problem sets to approach or address with your AI agent. The first is that each AI agent you develop should address a specific problem or deal with a particular task. Do not try to make an all-in-one agent. You'll get frustrated and it won't work. You have to give it discrete tasks. You need to take a problem set. You need to take a workflow that you go through in your practice, and you need to break it down into bite-sized chunks. And sometimes you may need to have separate AI agents take on separate parts of that task. And so the goal here should be singles, not home runs. And you want to start with simple problems and work your way up to more complex ones. Don't try to do everything at once because it will not work. And you may get frustrated and you may give up and not really unlock the potential that AI agents have. The next pointer on what kind of tasks to try to address with AI agents is to look for the following three attributes: repetition, automation, and reasoning. The task needs to be repetitive, it needs to be something that you can automate, and it needs to require reasoning. If you can check off those three boxes, then you've got something that an AI agent would be perfectly positioned to try to address. Repetition means if you don't do this task often enough, you're going to spend more time developing the agent than you will enjoying the payoff of it doing the task on the back end. So you really need something that you do often. Secondly, automation. If you can't automate it, then it's not going to be something that an agent can achieve in a more time-effective way. If the agent is just performing some tasks for you and then you're still having to do a bunch of manual work on top of that, then you need to really think carefully whether an agent is the right way to solve your problem. Maybe there's other approaches. The last attribute was reasoning. And here, what I mean is for a problem set to be appropriate for an AI agent to solve, you really need it to be a problem that requires doing some sort of analysis, applying some kind of reasoning. Maybe it's generating new content. And that is something that would distinguish the AI agent's role from regular process workflow tools, your regular process automation tools. And by that, I mean something like in a Microsoft suite, that would be Power Automate. And that's not something I think most practitioners have ever used. I've only recently started playing around with it, but all you need to know is separate from the Gen AI revolution, there are already powerful tools available to you within your productivity suite that allow you to automate simple tasks. What AI agents add to that is the ability to have those tasks form some sort of reasoning, some sort of analysis, generating new content for you. So let's give you a couple examples. Let's say you have a search that you've been doing on the web. Maybe now you do it as a prompt in your Gen AI chatbot tool. And it's a search that you do once a week. Perhaps you're checking in on some legal development to make sure you're not missing anything. Is that the kind of thing you would want to use an agent for? Probably not. The reason is it's probably not repetitive enough. And I don't think you get a lot from any kind of automation. Really, what you should be doing is just saving that prompt. Figure out what magic prompt works for you and gets you the answer you want. Just save it and then run it when you need to. But let's say you wanted to run that prompt. You wanted then to generate a report that's based on a standard format or structure, and you want to send that report out to a specific audience. Okay, so now you're taking that search, you're generating content, you want that content to look and feel a certain way, and then you want to be able to send it to a specific group of people who are interested in that content. Now we're talking, and now we're in the kind of space where you would really want to think about using an AI agent, because now you've added the automation component and you've added a reasoning component as well, because now you're actually having the agent do the analysis and generate some content for you. And you're also automating the process of sending out this report. Let's say it's an email. Now we're starting to check off those boxes. Now we're getting closer to a problem that might be well suited for an AI agent. Let's take another example. Let's say you want to set up an automated reply to an email that you get from business people. Okay, That sounds like it checks off the automation box because you're trying to take something you would have to do manually before, like replying to an email, and you are trying to get it to do that by itself. So that's good. Let's assume that it's repetitive. Let's say you get a lot of these emails every week. So it checks that off, but it doesn't really check off the reasoning box, right? You're not asking the tool to do any kind of reasoning analysis. You're just generating a standard response to that email. And you would not use an AI agent for that. You would go back to what I was describing as the process automation tool, like the Microsoft Power Automate. And that's more appropriate for it. You don't need it to have the full abilities of an agent. But let's say you want that reply to identify specific sources of information or knowledge to the person that sent you that email. And you want to identify a source of knowledge or information that is relevant to the question they've asked you. Okay, now we've added the reasoning element. Now we're trying to not only generate an automatic response to an email from a particular audience, but we are also adding in that we need something that can identify the topic that the person's asking about, and we need to be responding to that topic with some information relevant to that topic. And so now we've checked off the reasoning box. I think now we're at a point where you should think about using an AI agent. Finally, I will provide a few tips here for using these AI agents as you start playing around with it. I will provide the caveat that I'm still pretty early in this process. As I mentioned in the description of the podcast and in the intro of the podcast, you are coming along this journey with me. And part of that means this is not a fully baked conversation. This is not me speaking as an expert who has cracked the code and figured out how to exactly use an AI agent. You are really joining me as I am early in that process, but hopefully that gives you some additional insights that will make it especially useful for you as you are trying to think about doing this yourself. I think sometimes when you talk to an expert, they're so far advanced and they have so many assumptions built into their answers that you might get lost and you may not be getting the answers you want. So let me give you a few tips from the perspective of someone who is still learning how to use these tools himself. First of all, you want to be thoughtful about the underlying data you are using that the AI agent is tapping into. Here you can think of the old garbage in, garbage out analogy. And so if you are asking the AI agent to leverage your own internal data or any data for that matter, you need to make sure that the data is good. So going back to my example where we are generating some kind of email response using our own knowledge base of information. Let's say you are asking the chatbot agent to generate an email that points people to a certain policy or rule. You better make sure that the underlying data that's being referenced is structured, it's clear, and it's written in a way that is accurate and readable and usable by the AI agent. So whatever that source information might be, let's say it's policies, maybe it's your guidance materials, make sure that they are at the right level of detail, that they're comprehensive, that they have the information you need. Because if they don't, you can't expect the AI agent to do magic and create good content based on incomplete information. And similarly, if you are asking the AI agent to tap into public data, public sources, you need to understand the limitations of that information and the potential for that information to be inaccurate. Because if you're building an agent that relies on public sources of information, you can't expect it to have the same accuracy or be tailored in the way that your own data might be. The second tip is do not remove the human element from the process entirely. If you're asking the agent to draft something, have it be a draft and have it be something that you will review and approve before it gets sent. So you essentially want to put in almost like a human kill switch. If you're asking the agent to develop content that's going to go to a business audience or a client, you obviously want to make sure that it's accurate, it's complete. And so while it may be tempting to put everything on autopilot and have it just go ahead and send that email out, you probably would be wise at this point, at this stage of where the technology is, to build in a final step where you look at the content before it goes out. The third tip I have really applies for AI agents, but applies for any legal tech tools. And it's that agents or no particular legal tech tool is going to always be the right solution for every problem. And AI is not always going to be the right solution for every problem. The point is, you never want to use a particular technology just for the sake of it. Lawyers have been lawyering for a long time. A lot of us have become hyper efficient at how we do our work. And that may be news to some people who are clients. Maybe they perceive some inefficiency in how lawyers operate, and I'm sure that's true. But in terms of our use of our limited time that we have as lawyers, we tend to have very specific ways we do it because it's worked for us. And it's something that we've tinkered with over the years and made into an effective approach. And so if it ain't broke, don't fix it. What does that have to do with AI agents? It means that just because there's a new technology or a new way to solve a problem doesn't mean you have to use it. And you certainly don't want to be the person bringing a battleship to a knife fight. Often there may be a simple or more streamlined tool out there for doing what you need to do. It may not be something that's AI powered. It may not be an AI agent. It could be, for example, those process automation functionalities. Maybe it's just something that's built into a SharePoint site. Maybe it's a task list. Maybe it's some kind of collaboration platform. Or maybe it's just using your calendar more smartly and being more effective with how you organize yourself. There are a lot of ways to become more efficient. And I think there's a risk of falling into a rabbit hole, expecting that the latest and most advanced technology is going to be the default approach to any problem. I think that is absolutely not the case. I think there's a lot of things where the problem may not even be solvable by anything that we have right now. It may not be a problem worth spending your time solving because it's just not that big of a deal. Or it might be something you can solve using something that you already have at your disposal and that you're already highly proficient in. So those are my tips for using AI agents and an overview of what role I see these AI agents playing in legal practice. I'm really excited to start playing around with it more and start deploying them in my work. And I will be sure to share any tips or successes and failures that come out of it as I move along this journey. And I hope you will share your experience as well. Thank you so much for listening. This podcast has been bootstrapped by me, Kai Rosga, with music by Brett Ryback.